Now know that Merrick Garland has requested the unsealing of the document, and here it is. It's just been sent to us. This is the request to unseal both the warrant and the list of the items that were taken from Donald Trump's Mar-A-Lago estate. There are actually three parts to this. The third would, of course, be the underlying affidavit, which would give us chapter and verse of what was happening in this case. That is not being unsealed. What we're getting now is presumably shortly. There was a lot of speculation about why this news conference, as it were, statement, more accurately, was scheduled for 2:30 Eastern time and didn't begin until shortly after 3. It's possible that they were waiting for this judge to make a ruling on the unsealing of the limited warrant materials, as it says at the top of this 5-page statement. So presumably shortly we will know what Donald Trump and his lawyers already knew, and that is the contents of the limited warrant itself. Eamon Javers is in Washington with us. Eamon, the affidavit itself would be more revealing, but this will give us an idea of at least what the former president and his counsel know.
Yeah, we're about to know a lot more about this, Shep, and you heard Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, there explaining that he's very limited in what he can say. And in fact, Department of Justice observers would be astonished to see an Attorney General commenting at all about an ongoing investigation in normal circumstances. And what we just heard from the Attorney General here is that these are not normal circumstances. He cited the surrounding circumstances in the publicity of this event, the fact that the former president, Donald Trump, notified the public about this search of his home earlier this week, as is his right. And he said there is substantial public interest in what the Department of Justice is doing here. Garland going to great lengths here to publicly defend the Department of Justice's conduct so far this week on this issue, and saying he personally signed off on the search warrant that was applied for earlier in the week. He says the Department of Justice did not take this decision lightly. That is, to go into the home of a former president of the United States against his will. Presumably, the Department of Justice knew just exactly what to expect here in terms of the outcry of publicity and the outpouring of criticism from Trump defenders that they have gotten. And just within the next couple of minutes here, we do expect to see these new documents now detailing exactly what the Department of Justice can say publicly so far about all of this. But this is extraordinary.
I'm frankly not entirely sure that that's a given, and that goes to the very end of this document, which I've now been able to read through. At the end of it, it says, it goes through the reasons that the Merrick Garland and others believe that this should now be unsealed, and then says, argument in these circumstances, the court should unseal the search warrant, including attachments A and B, and the property receipt, meaning the list of the items that were taken from the property by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It says those attachments and the property receipt absent objection from the former president. We all know that had the former president wanted to release these documents, the former president could have done exactly that. He has every right to release that, just as any other citizen who'd been served such a warrant has the right to do that. But the former president and his counsel chose not to do that. Instead, by all observations, it's clear he used the absence of information, that void of specificity, to create this hubbub, which we've all been watching on the political right and on certain cable channels, this ginning up of an enormous conspiracy theory, which has led the Republican governor candidate from the state of Arizona and many others in Kari Lake to suggest that the FBI should be disbanded and defunded. I mean, what we're living through at the moment is an appropriate absence of detailed information and an inappropriate ginning up of a large portion of society, which has caused the Department of Justice to take this step. We can only presume that if, in fact, there is no objection from the former president, we don't yet know, we'll have an understanding. Because what we already know is on June the 3rd, the beginning of this summer, a subpoena was issued for these 15 boxes of information, which are the property of the United States government, which were taken from the property of the United States government by a then former employee in the former president of the United States. They requested that those boxes be returned. On June 8th, the information says that there were and more classified documents inside Mar-A-Lago. It's a reporting of NBC News that they requested that another lock be put in the area of Mar-A-Lago where those documents were contained. And then during a period between June and August, there was an informant who said that there may be more classified documents inside Mar-A-Lago. And all of that leads up to the September the 8th, or the August the 8th, 2 days ago, execution of this search warrant at Mar-A-Lago. All of this could have been avoided had the former president and his counsel decided to release the documents, which Merrick Garland is now asking a judge to release to all of us. Eamon.
Yeah, that's right, Shep. And the document that the Department of Justice has just made public within the past few seconds is the United States motion to unseal the limited warrant materials. So we'll see whether those get unsealed here in the coming hours or days, or exactly when we're going to get that material. But this is a battle that you just saw. Merrick Garland is a man who is trying not to become James Comey here. You remember James Comey back in the 2016 presidential campaign went out publicly and explained why it was that they had reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server at a time when the national attention on the presidential campaign was at a fever pitch. A lot of Democrats criticized Comey for coming forward at that time, talking about the investigation at all and lending credence to allegations against Hillary Clinton. In this case, what Merrick Garland is saying is that he did not want to come out and talk about this publicly at all for that very reason. That is, you don't want to cast aspersions on somebody who may be perfectly innocent just because you're conducting an investigation. You might not find anything. But in this case, because the former president went out publicly with this information, therefore that changes the game. There's enormous public interest. He's feeling a need to explain himself at least a little bit here, and we should get some more detail on exactly what it is that they're searching for. What we won't probably get at all is the contents of those classified documents that are at the heart of this whole matter. What exactly is it that the Department of Justice is trying to protect that was inside Mar-A-Lago? That's the central mystery here. We don't know the answer to that now. It's not clear whether we'll ever know the answer to that.